to edit and storytell in itself is not an easy task. Producers actually have to sit with your editors. So I can imagine how tough it was for you. But imagine, guys, if we were in lockdown in 1998.
Creative Conversations.
Hey Zouk family, welcome back. Another week, another talking to a regional hero, and this is a man that many people will recognize the voice of. 8 years with HITZ FM. Arnold is no stranger to Malaysia or Malaysians. Second up, he's got a very, very hip clothing label, Pestle Mortar, and he'll be telling us more about it. And then I'm going to deep dive into his transition, not just from radio presenter into podcaster with the Fashion Week. He's a man who can put me to shame as we do this podcast. He's far more experienced. I might as well pass the hosting over to you, Arnold. I think you're better qualified than I am to do it. And then we've got the younger version of both of us, Alex, joining us this week. We all saw from his cocktail classes before. Arnold, Alex is almost too handsome to be on this in comparison to us. I'm going to put a graphic over the top of him. So. First and foremost, how are you, Arnold? How have you been? How was 2020? We're out into 2021.
Yeah.
What did you learn last year?
Wow, 2020, man. Definitely a year to remember, or to forget, right? I learned that I learned how to stay at home. That's one. I think a lot of us learn how to stay at home and just to sit still and be still, right? I know how to actually go and buy groceries and actually get everything on that list right, because I used to not be able to get cafe lime leaves. I never knew what those were. I had to ask somebody at the supermarket. I remember this happened in June last year, and the lady had to tell me, "Oh yeah, that's cafe lime leaves in Malay." So I was, I know it's silly, but yeah, Joe, thank you so much for having me on the show, and thank you, Alex, as well. Thank you, Zouk, for doing this. It's really cool. Excited, man. So what are we talking about? COVID?
Well, we will get on to COVID. Let's start on a more positive light. I want to know about your 8 years at HITZ, because radio has been a major factor in my life. It's a major factor in Zouk's existence, because most people would hear their tracks first through radio. I was nurtured on like Capital Radio, HITZ FM in London, and I loved the driving into work, driving home from work, even driving into school, out of school, the chart hits. I would hear it all on radio first, and you're a man who's lived it. So how did you get into it, and how has it transitioned over the last 10 years?
So I actually started out in the broadcasting industry in television, right? So I actually studied mass communications, as everyone does when they are unsure of what to do with their lives. So I started in 2008 working for this TV station called 8TV, which is with Media Prima here in Malaysia. And I was just doing behind the scenes, really started from the bottom. I was a production assistant. I used to get the talents clothes, get their coffee, write little scripts and stuff. And I was doing TV behind the scenes for about 2.5 to almost 3 years. And I kind of decided, I kind of looked around and I decided, I'm not going to really go far here. And I think TV is a very small industry in Malaysia, especially if you're working with English TV, because the audience here is much smaller, compared to the Malay audience or the Chinese audience. So I felt like I was in the wrong market, but it was too late. I'm Chinese, but I cannot speak Chinese. I cannot read Chinese, which was a disadvantage for me, right? So the good thing was I met a lot of people during my time working as a producer on TV, and some of those people told me, you speak English pretty well, why not try out for radio, right? So I thought about it, and there was an audition that came up, and I just went for it. Failed dismally at my first audition. I was told though, as a consolation, that I remember specifically the judge told me, I think you have what it takes, but there's just something lacking. I think she could have just been being nice, right? And I took it and I went about my day, and I went back to my regular job producing TV. But later on, they called me back again because they needed to fill, a guy left and they needed to fill that spot. So they auditioned me again, and long story short, I kind of got the job. So yeah, so it's been, how many years has it been? I started radio in 2011, so it's been what, nine years? Yeah. Nearly
a testimonial year. But let me ask you, okay, you touched on COVID at the very beginning. I had a brief chat with you beforehand about this. How on earth did you transition during the COVID times when the outbreak happened last year? Because radio is an essential service, correct?
Yeah.
And yet you can't go into the studio. So how do you adapt?
So what happened was, for the first 2 weeks of the lockdown of the MCO, we were still going to the studios. We had letters, because essential service and whatnot. But as the situation got worse, we were told by our bosses, I think everybody should stay at home. So how we did our show from home was exactly what we're doing now, right? But we were on like Skype or Zoom. So the conversation that my partner Ian and myself had was all recorded on Skype, and my producer would then edit whatever needed to be edited, and they would upload it onto the system, and we just play the next day on air. So we were recording our show a day before, a day ahead. Yeah, and that was the best we could do with the equipment that we had, with just like everyday people's equipment, right? I mean, of course, we have loved to have like mics, like really great quality sounding mics, but unfortunately that was not the case. So we just had to make do with what we had, lah. Yeah.
Did it work?
I think it worked to a certain extent. If you're talking about how easy it was not easy. Like I think I was telling you this just now. So we found ourselves very frustrated most of the time, because what would take an hour to do took like 2 hours to do. So working from home was tough in that sense. Everything took longer. You had to do everything the long way, whereas when you're in the studio, everything's there. You had sound bites, you had buttons to press, and your sound effects would come on. But now you don't. So you're purely relying on yourselves, right? And so it gets tough. I don't want to get too technical, but yeah, it takes away from the little things that we do every day, right?
Well, it's damn clever that you managed to move so fast and interact. And it shows the advancement in technology, because, to be honest, Alex and I took this up in March, about the same time that you probably would have moved back to your home, because we realized that we had no way to communicate with our client base. I mean, we're not pumping out live pictures of club nights or communicating about special offers or anything like that. So we wanted to keep the brand alive.
Right.
But it's challenging, right? Because you're at the behest of internet, you're at the behest of weather. As you know, in Malaysia, if it rains, you basically have zero TVs, zero radios.
How did you cope with the whole working from home for the first month at least, being on Zoom calls every day and whatnot?
So, dude, it was a bit unique for me. I mean, Alex and I can give you two different answers. Alex was home with his family, his parents, just happened to be in the right place at the right time to not be stuck up the hill. I was literally one of a very small percentage of people that were still here. So actually Zouk Digital saved my mental health, because it gave me a chance to interact constantly with people. We were doing 20 videos a week back then. So
wow.
It was great for me. I really enjoyed it, because I got a lot of FaceTime with a lot of people. We're talking about international DJs. I've been talking to someone in the Netherlands. I've been talking to someone in New York. I've been talking to event organizers in Amsterdam. So for me, it was great. From Alex, I guess I'll let Alex answer. From the development and production end of like coordinating between myself, who would churn out the stuff, as well as we were doing mixes here, and then we would send them to Alex to get edited. It's a whole different process than it is if the guy's sitting next to you in the office. Do you know what I mean? Because I guess Alex says, you need a lot of data, a lot of bandwidth, and minor edits take ages, because it comes in, download, and then just say change 1 second and go back. It's like, as you say, there's a loss of hours.
Yeah.
What I would have done is I would have taken a ton of notes down, and I would tell them to our editor on how you would edit, and what you would cut out, and what you would keep, and what effects you would add for each video. So our editor had to be on the phone with me at least 20 times a day, same like Joe. So,
oh man, yeah, I can imagine, dude. Like, I used to work in production as well, right? And we had to edit and storytell in itself is not an easy task. Producers actually have to sit with your editors. So I can imagine how tough it was for you. But imagine, guys, if we were in lockdown in 1998, would it have been as much fun?
Dude, it wouldn't be possible. I mean, I can't imagine. I would have been standing there with like a screw-top camera, a disposable camera, trying to take snapshots and post them to Alex to post. But I think we're lucky in the way that you're right, Arnold. I mean, the mere fact that we're doing this now, and all we've had to do is click a couple of buttons, and internet is a lot more reliable now. But it will never match face-to-face communication. I mean, we had 24 DJs lined up for 2020. We got two, and the chance to develop the growth of the company digitally is phenomenal. 600 videos we've done now, but it's not the same as putting on the experiences we used to see the crowd with their hands in the air, with goosebumps, having their best night of their life, so to speak. You can't replace that.
For sure. Yeah.
Tell me. I want to ask you about something else. You have a hugely successful and very, very popular clothing label. It's very cool. I knew about it when I moved to Malaysia. To be totally honest, when I first experienced someone talking about it or showing me it or seeing it tagged, I didn't know it was Malaysian groomed.
Right.
But you and you said your brother and another friend kick-started Pestle Mortar. Can you tell us all about it?
Yeah, but first of all, thank you for saying that. That's very kind of you. So in 2010, my brother Arthur and my really good friend of mine, Hugh, the three of us decided to start this thing because it really started from when Hugh and I used to go to school together since we were 13 or whatever, and we grew up liking the same things, subcultures and whatnot. When you were teenagers, we used to listen to the same music. We used to be really into Blink 182. Those I'm pretty sure, Joe, you're like about my age, right?
10%.
Yes.
Blink 182. I love Blink 182, man.
Right, Sum 41. So we grew up liking the same culture. We used to skate and all, or used to try to skateboard. Back then, these guys, like the Blink 182 guys, they had their own brands. Famous Stars and Straps, Atticus, Macbeth, which I don't even know. I think some of these brands don't even exist anymore. So a lot of that kind of inspired us to want to do our own thing, right? It's like, if these like punk kids can do that, why not us? And when we came back from overseas after going to uni and all that, and we started working, we're like, hey, we should really do this, because we kind of found like a hole in the market where we felt like like if you were buying American streetwear, like imported streetwear, it doesn't matter if it's from America or the UK or whatever, but it was expensive, especially with the exchange rate. If you were buying streetwear back then in 2008, 2009, 2010, one t-shirt costed like maybe 300 ringgit, and 300 ringgit for any college kid is just impossible. It's a lot of money. So we thought, hey, why not start something local, something that we can represent and something that we can be proud of, right? And so we got together, we tried it out, and I remember our first sort of gig was Urbanscapes. Remember Urbanscapes back in the day? Yeah. So Urbanscapes 2010 was our little testing ground, right? They had like the markets, and they had vendors who, you would sell stuff. And most of the time it was like girls selling knickknacks or clothes from Bangkok or whatever, little boutiques. So here are three guys, the only three guys at this festival selling clothes, right? But I think what caught the attention of people were, we back then like packaged our little t-shirts in like pizza boxes. So people were walking past our booth and they were like, oh shit, are these guys selling food? So they would come to our booth and be like, oh no, it's selling t-shirts. So then they would get to talking, and tell them about the brand and blah, blah, blah. And it just went from there. So Urbanscapes really worked for us, really kind of got the word out. And after that, I think that same company who does Urbanscapes, I think it was Freeform, they continued to do like a bi-weekly markets thing at Jaya One, which was also like a lot of girls, selling knickknacks and jewelry and accessories. So we decided to hit those markets, and we did it every single time for like almost 2 years. So we were the only guys there, right? And for the bored boyfriends that were forced to go with their girlfriends shopping, they would have something to look at, which was our store. So I think that sort of kind of got the word out. And at the time, there were little to none, like there were no local brands. It was just us and like maybe two other guys, right? And so that's how we started. And very fortunate to still be around after 10 years. It was our 10-year anniversary last year. It was supposed to be a big party. Unfortunately, COVID. So maybe this year.
Congratulations. First things first. Blink 182, Travis Barker, greatest drummer of all time, for sure.
Thank you.
Second thing, that's really, really cool. So I'm really always interested when people start clothing labels, right? You must start with it. So you screen print yourself, and then or you get an MOQ from a factory, but it must be so hard because building up a profile pre-social media influencer days. I got a lot of respect for you for doing that. So how did you go about getting the brand well known back then?
Yeah, so I think this was like right before or just on the cusp of Instagram, I think. Of course, we had a Facebook page and all that. But in terms of production, we didn't screen print them on our own. We actually had a friend whose mom ran like a clothing manufacturing company, and she had her own printers and stuff. So we were like, oh, we're just a bunch of kids. We got some money. We're gonna try to print maybe 50 t-shirts or whatever, see how it comes out. We came up with, I think, just for the Urbanscapes launch, we prepared 8 designs. If I'm not wrong, correct? Don't quote me on this. But I remember we had 5 photo tees. So I think our concept was for 5 designs, we wanted to take pictures of things that were quintessentially Malaysian. Like if a Malaysian person saw it on a t-shirt, they would immediately relate to it. So I think one of the standout pieces was the telur mata on the Indomie goreng, right? Which is a staple. If you go to a mamak these days, it's for the international people watching this. If you don't know what that is, it's fried instant noodles with a sunny side up egg on it. Okay, and then we took a picture of that, slammed it on a t-shirt, fucking sold out, right? So those were the sort of concepts that we were playing around with, and I guess our brand was more, it's Malaysian stuff for Malaysians, right? Or more like we just wanted to represent where we were from, right? And so I think from that Urbanscapes gig, we met a lot of people who showed a lot of interest in the brand, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. We were on, we got interviewed on BFM and and whatnot, and we took part in a lot of back then there were a lot of people used to call it hipster events, and we used to be a part of a lot of these events, and we used to throw parties as well. So we were very lucky. Our little showroom that we had back in 2010 for our brand was based in this bungalow, and at the back of this bungalow was this big space. So we threw like events, like we had like Sunday barbecues. People would just come, we'd drink beers, and it'd just be like a small thing. So it started off like maybe 10 people, and it grew and it grew and it grew. And we had, before we knew it, it was like an event. We had Kyoto Protocol playing, on those events and stuff. And we had like beer pong parties. Yeah, I mean, that was when I was a lot younger, bro. Like, it's different times now. You know what I mean?
Well, I think it's still an amazing achievement. I mean, Alex, you know the brand well. You're one of the first people, because I met Alex when I first came to Malaysia half a decade ago, to point out the label to me. I guess it's a label you've grown up with.
Yes, we've been hearing it since I like to say it, during my early uni days, just finished high school till now. It's been quite relevant. Yeah, recently I actually saw one of your designs, which is quite relatable to us, which is there's a thing called Tarik Pong, which I saw, which is the sweater. And I'm actually thinking of getting that one, because it's really cold up here in Genting, and a sweater will always work wonders. So Tarik Pong sweater, I'm going to go get one myself,
Yeah, that's right. We always try to, include more Malaysian elements into our designs. And the design that you speak of is actually our latest collaboration with an American streetwear brand called Chinatown Market. We were lucky to have built a relationship with the owner a few years ago, and the fact that this collaboration happened for us this year in the COVID year, we're actually quite happy about it. So the collection's out now. You can go check it out on pestlemortarclothing.com.
Many congratulations.
Thank you.
To get it to 10 years is phenomenal, and secondly, to get the opportunity to be strong enough to cross-collaborate during such a difficult time. It's a marker to the success that you've had.
Again, we've been so fortunate with all the support that we get, and also the relationships that we've built, right? Yeah.
So do you think there's going to be a Pestle Mortar Zouk collaboration coming up soon?
Hey, why not, man? I think, we've, throughout our 10 years, we've had many memories at Zouk. I remember the juice parties used to be at Zouk. We did a juice t-shirt, and I believe it was at Zouk. I think it was the old Zouk on Jalan Ampang. Yeah, those days, man. So yeah, Zouk is definitely a big part of all of our Pestle Mortar memories, dude.
It's like a stable part of growing up in Kuala Lumpur or even Malaysia. Same with Singapore, to be honest.
Yeah.
Very exciting that Vegas gets to experience some of that special Asian entertainment value that hopefully Zouk will bring over. Now, let me move over. Obviously, we talked a bit earlier about the growth of podcasting, especially radio paved the way for this big time. And with the birth of things like Netflix, television drops off a bit. I mean, everything is, you want it on demand whenever you like. And then we've seen this huge burst of podcasts. You do one yourself, the Fashion Week, with a play on the spelling of week. Can you go in and introduce us to what the Fashion Week is all about?
Yeah, so the Fashion Week podcast, which you can listen to on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and wherever it is you listen to your podcast, it's spelled The Fashion, W-E-A-K. Yeah, I'm glad you caught that wordplay, because some people would just be like, what's up with the name, you know? It started as kind of a joke, actually. So I hosted with this guy, Lucas, who's my on-air podcast partner. He used to work as a communications guy at Pestle Mortar Clothing. And that's how we met, right? And I've always known Lucas to be a hype beast, if you will. He's my age. We're both 35, and the guy spends more money on sneakers and clothes than anyone else I know. Like, sometimes I just wonder, how do you pay for your car, or how do you pay for your rent or whatever? Because he spends, like, without even thinking twice. So this guy, super fashionable, super knowledgeable about this whole culture, about streetwear and all that. And I felt like, having done radio for so long, I already had that discipline, which, you know, podcasting and hosting a radio show is pretty much the same discipline. I thought, hey, why not do my own thing, right? You know, I don't know how long this radio thing is gonna last. Really, who knows? So I said, okay, let's do a podcast. But when you start a podcast, you can't just start a podcast and just talk about anything, right? I think podcasts these days, especially the good ones, are kind of niche. I mean, Joe Rogan aside, the number one podcaster in the world, Joe Rogan can talk to anybody and make it good, right? But I think you need to find a niche that you're comfortable with, because if not, you're just going to ramble on about things that you probably don't know, right? So I thought fashion would be a good thing, since, you know, I come from the whole Pestle Mortar world, and Lucas was so in tune with streetwear and sneakers and whatnot. So I thought it would be a good pairing. So the initial idea was, and this is like some behind the scenes secrets, I guess. The initial idea for the podcast, I wanted to call it Hype Dads, right? Because I felt like the two hosts that are hosting this podcast are 35-year-old men who still spend money on, we're not married, we don't have kids, we still spend money on buying clothes and sneakers, and we're still looking on Hypebeast and Instagram every day to keep up with, you know, what's in and what's cool and what's trendy, right? Not so much me, more Lucas, but so I thought we wanted to interview like-minded people. So people from our circles of friends who are already married and have kids, but are still in this culture, like heavy, you know, are still buying shoes and still dropping 3,000 ringgit on Yeezys and whatnot, which is ridiculous to me, by the way. But the idea didn't really come through, or we were not so comfortable with it, because I didn't feel like we had enough guests to go around. It was a little bit too specific, right? I had like a list of 10 people that I wanted to interview, and after that it was just like, okay, then what? So I think we needed to make it more general, but still along the lines of fashion. So we call it the Fashion Week. And I personally, I think, coming from sort of a content background, if you will, what I've learned for producing radio shows is what I try to apply to this podcast, right? So my podcast, the show is broken down into different segments. We have games, we have quizzes and whatnot, all tailored to who we're speaking to. So it depends, right? If we're not talking to a sneakerhead today, we won't ask questions about sneakers. So I think, sort of curating your content around your guests is quite important. And so that's what we try to do. And I think so far, so we started this podcast in May of 2018. And we just did our 50th episode like in December last year. So pretty happy about that. Still going, you know. The views are not huge, like no big no big listens or no big numbers yet, but yeah, we're still having fun with it. So yeah.
And do you know what, man? It's a really saturated market. As long as you're having fun, that's the most important thing. I mean, we don't get millions and millions of people tune in, but we just love the fact that those who are interested get something out of it. Right. It's always good to spitball, and to be honest, the more natural and less, it's not cool to be try hard about what you're pushing. I mean, even today, we've learned something, Alex and I, from you big time, and we've managed to shoot some interesting, but have some good banter at the same time. So I think there's no pressure on the viewers and listeners, man. And anything that grows organically is always so much better, right? Than forced and then paying for views or likes.
I'd like to ask you guys though, what has kept you going, for doing this show? And if you don't mind me asking, I'm sure you've had some not so nice guests or not so fun guests or whatever. I get asked this question all the time. Who was your worst guest of all time? Blah, blah, blah. So I want to know. I mean, you don't have to mention any names, but I just want to know the process, right?
Well, there was this guy Arnold Loh, right? To be honest with you, Arnold, like as I said, I really enjoy the capacity to catch up with people, and I love hearing people's stories. There's a lot of unsung heroes. We just did a video with the K9 unit of Resorts for Genting, and they basically keep the resorts safe. And people underestimate because they don't see it every day, but they do bomb flushings, they do riot testing. I mean, they basically prevent a lot of major issues that would happen in a resort that gets 25 million visitors a year, and a chance to give them a voice is like a really nice thing for Alex and I to do. But meeting and talking to interesting people, because at the end of the day, I can genuinely tell you, Anna, like it's been a pleasure to chat to you. You freestyle, you interact with us, you teach us about things we've never heard of. And everyone out there that's listened to a radio show won't have a clue what goes into it. They won't have a clue how you pivoted. They won't understand that you had to go through serious arduous in order to get it done during MCO. So the chance for people hopefully to appreciate that is a bonus. But mostly it's great to link with people, Yeah. It's great conversation. What do I love most about Malaysia is that the Mamak culture, you go there honestly, you either go to eat or drink to discuss everything that happens, whether it's a business deal or a catch up or a relationship problem or meet new people. Everything is done over food and drink, right? And conversation. And we are just a further extension of that. So that's what keeps us going, I think.
How long have you been here now, Alex? As Joe, sorry.
I've been here now 6 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. Right. And do you and Alex get to catch up in person, or do you guys just Zoom call each other every day?
Unfortunately for Alex, he has to see me every day. I think that's a pain in his ass because I've always got a to-do list as long as my arm for him. But
shit. Okay.
So we work together in the development of Trek, the downtown hub, and then I moved up here after a stint in Singapore with Zouk, and then I asked Alex to come and join, and it's a pleasure, and it's great working with a friend because we have kind of similar minds, but we enjoy each other's company. Alex has to nod; he has no choice. Otherwise, I'll look for a new job. Basically,
there's a box here that says "Save me."
I think Arnold, the podcast it's fantastic to learn more about the local regional market than I did before. Talking to international DJs is phenomenal. It's great the chance to talk to like Ferry Corsten, etc. Don't get me wrong, especially if you're a fan. But the chance, we've spoken to yoga teachers downtown, we've spoken to teachers at Taylor's University, we're speaking to you about not just radio, about clothing labels, about podcasting. And just learning is the best part. 100%.
Yeah. Agreed, man. Yeah, and I think that's what gets me going as well, right? It's always a learning process. Even like with podcasting, I mean, I think people think that, oh, you guys have been doing it for so long, you know everything there is like to know. You never always know, because I think the industry or the medium is constantly changing, and you just have to keep learning to keep up with it, man. Yeah.
It's a different, I guess it's a very different question for Alex because I'm the same generation as you are now, just a little bit older, but we're both the radio generation, right? I've experienced what you do as a consumer and I love it. But for Alex, I guess the podcasting is now a normality, which I think is don't get me wrong, it's normal for you and I now because of Spotify. Like you mentioned Joe Rogan, who doesn't know who Joe Rogan is? But Alex, I guess it's much, you've transitioned in both and a lot faster than myself and Arnold have, because for 2 decades, all Arnold and I had was radio and TV.
Yeah. Being like a 90s kid will give you that insight to say, okay, you grew up with, radio, and then you sort of transition to, as technology advances, you get into a new phase and it just improve along with it. So you basically learn to adapt, right?
Yeah.
That's what it is.
I know. And I was having a chat with Alex before. I called him out on this because he was asking me questions about my radio show. And I had to ask him the question, do you even listen to HITZ, bro? And he said,
I used to.
He said, no, man, I listen to podcasts. I was like, all right, there you go.
Arnold, I think the first time that you and I would have engaged any sort of major change was MTV. So MTV was like, I just had radio. there was none of this stuff on TV. There was like Top of the Pops, and then MTV merged music videos, and I remember spending hours watching MTV. Like, you had content like Beavis and Butthead, you had non-stop music videos, and then they would break it down into MTV Bass, which was about hip hop. You would have and you would have different shows towards different music, and that was the closest to a podcast I ever remember.
Yeah, no, for sure. I completely agree. I think MTV really shaped our generation. I mean, when I say our, I mean you and I, Joe. From coming back from school and watching Britney Spears, however many music videos she's done, and all the reality shows on MTV. I think we grew up with like The Real World and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And that was where we got our entertainment news from, right?
90%, I would say, without any doubt, that I wouldn't know what any famous artist looked like that wasn't a superstar. Like, you're talking about Madonna or MJ, anyone who was in the charts, I wouldn't have a clue what they looked like if it wasn't for MTV. Because there would be no media, they wouldn't be reported about in the newspaper. Yeah, and those kind of those trashy magazines hadn't really gone out in a big way. But MTV opened the door to, what does Blink 182 look like? What does Sum 42 look like? What does, a plethora of people look like? And it's through the chance to see music videos, which I guess is what YouTube is now, right?
Oh yeah, pretty much. And but the great thing about YouTube now is that everything is on demand, right? You can watch whatever you want whenever you want. But when it was MTV, we just consume what they fed us, right? And I think that's the difference. By the way, this is really random, but has anyone told you, Joe, that you look like Eminem?
That's a new one.
I've had a few. I mean, I've had Mark Zuckerberg, I've had Calvin Harris, those are the two most prominent ones. And then really, people who really want to offend me say Andy Roddick, the tennis player.
Why is that offensive again?
He's not the best looking guy, trust me. He's a lot richer than I am and a lot more talented. But you're the second person. I'm trying to remember. I think it was Ben, our motion graphic guy, that said Eminem before. But
yeah. It's a hat. The whole hat thing right now. Yeah.
I'm not taking it off because the Mark Zuckerberg one will come out in force.
Fair enough.
Very good. This is the downside to cameras. Look, Arnold, we got to wrap up, but we could have spoken for 3 hours on this. You've been such a pleasure, and I really appreciate Alex for introducing you to the podcast. We love what you do. You're obviously a legend in your own right for what you've done over the last 10 years, not just with your clothing label, but predominantly with radio. And it's phenomenal that we got the chance to speak to you, and thank you so much.
Oh, that's very kind of you, man. Thank you so much for having me, Joe, Alex, and let's do this again soon. Maybe when everything goes back to normal, if you'd like to come on to the Fashion Week podcast and just shoot the shit, let me know.
It'd be a lot of fun, and I think the next time, Anna, we do have a section called Macan With, where we invite people to different resorts for Genting eateries, and we do it in person, and that would be definitely something we'd love to do with you.
Let's do it. Yeah, I'm down.
Stay safe during whatever the upcoming MCO, RCO, whatever it will end up being. Whatever normality is, which I don't think we'll know till maybe, honestly, 2022, etc. Just stay safe and look after yourself.
Yeah, you guys too, man. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.
Take care.
Thanks, Alex. Bye.
Let me show you how it sounds like.